Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to the beginning of the 16th cycle at Perek Achadei. So it's right. That's okay.
16, 45 years.
I'm saying so. Shoshaprakim. It's the 46th time. So Perek Achad. It's the for Perek Achad. It's the for Perek Achad. It's the 16th time because the Perek Achad takes 1/3 of the time. Takes 2 times as long. It's 3 years per year. Yeah. Okay.
That's 48. At the beginning of 48.
Being a 48, is that what it is?
No, you just said that. 46 years.
It was the beginning of the 16th cycle. It's not the end of the 16th cycle. Okay. So it's been 15. Now we just finished 15 in Shoshaprakim and 45th of the Perek Achad.
Okay.
Okay, let's see if I can get this to go. No. What else does it need from me over here? Okay. Dr. Rambam. So in most Kisviyah, the first beginning starts off. So the word Hakdama, the preparation, it's not the Rambam himself. It's from other people who added it. The Rambam, it's the beginning of the Sefer. Most Kisviyah start B'Shem Hashem K'Elam B'Shem Hashem God of the world. Again, the Rambam is saying, I'm doing this for the sake of Hashem, not for my own interest, my own personal interest. I'm not going to be embarrassed when I gaze at all your mitzvahs. The Rambam is talking. So the idea that I'm saying I have no shame in the fact I'm collecting all of the mitzvahs into one sefer, even though there was some controversy as to whether the Rambam should be doing that. But that the Rambam saying is that exactly what the Eibush wants me to do. All the mitzvahs that were commanded to Moshe on Har Sinai were given with their explanation. It says, I'm going to give you the stone luchis, which have on them the Aseret of the Ten Commandments. The Torah and the rest of the Torah, meaning even the rest of the Torah should be chesed. That's not the luchis. The mitzvah and the commandment. These are 3 things. We know what the luchis are. What is Torah and what is mitzvah? Torah is Torah should be chesed. Torah is written Torah besides what it says in the luchis. Mitzvah, the commandments, that the push of this explanation of the mitzvah is the Torah SheBal peh. We've been commanded last say Torah to conduct ourselves to perform the Torah. Mitzvah, according to the mitzvah, according to the oral Torah. Mitzvah zuhi anika SheBal peh. In our vernacular, we call this the oral Torah SheBal peh. Now, Rambam is basically giving us a history lesson, so to speak, like how did we get from the Eibush on Har Sinai to the Rambam Sefer today, right? That's what the idea of this is. The entire Torah Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it with his own handwriting before he passed away. The Chshav is his own handwriting, obviously dictated to him by Hashem. But Nasan Sefer l'chol shev, in other words, throughout his lifetime, more parts of Torah were added. And then on the Moshe Rabbeinu's final, on the last day of his life, the entire Torah, the Chumash, was completed. So he wrote the entire Torah.
At that point, he wrote the whole thing?
That's when the Sefer Torah, he wrote, it was a bit longer way, Pashas, yeah. The Nasan Sefer l'chol shev v'shevet, he gave a Sefer for every single Shevet, one per Shevet, that's 12 Sfarim. The Sefer Echad, Nastanu l'Aron l'Eid. One Sefer Torah was put in the Aron as an aid, as a testimony. It says, take this Sefer Torah, put it in the Aron of the covenant that Hashem would luchis and it'll be with you as a testimony, meaning it was like a testimony to Moshe Rabbeinu's authenticity of the Torah, and it can't be altered by anybody. Each Sefer Torah written by given to each Shevet was for the Sanhedrin of that Shevet to preserve. Every single Yid has to write his own Torah, but this is for them to preserve that this is the authenticity of the Torah. The mitzvah is the explanation of the Torah. It was not written. He commanded to the Zikain, to the elders, to Yeshua especially, and to all the Jewish people. It wasn't given just to the Zikain. It says, it's the whole entire matter I command you today, you should guard to do. Meaning Hashem, Moshe is telling all the Yidden, you've been commanded to perform the Torah. That's why it's called the Oral Torah. Since it was never written down, that's what's called the Oral Torah. So why is Rambam now writing down the Mishnah Torah? In that case, we'll see. Despite the fact that the oral Torah was not written, not pshat, it was not written, it didn't exist. Moshe Rabbeinu taught that the oral Torah to his Beis Din and to the 70 Zakanim specifically. Again, as you said earlier, and then to all Yidden. Elazar Pinchas, Elazar, Aaron's son. Interesting, as mentioned Aaron himself. Pinchas and Yeshua and Yeshua, they both received from Moshe. The Chaydav is the same generation as Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
But that's okay. To the main three people who taught Torah to the next generation after Moshe was Elazar, Pinchas, and Yeshua. They were all three received from Moshe, the primary students of Moshe. The Yeshua, who and Shua, who is the primary student of Moshe Rabbeinu among them three. He gave him the Torah SheBal and commanded him regarding it, meaning he gave him the responsibility of teaching it to all the Yidden. Similarly, Yeshua, his whole entire lifetime, taught Torah to the Yidden orally. Many elders, many scholars received from Yeshua, meaning that they were taught students of Yeshua. The Kibbutz Eli as a kingdom of PM, and Eli received from them. Eli was there. Eli was the Kohen Gadol in the times of Shmuel Navi. Shmuel was a kid.
That's later.
Right, sure. Well, I studied that the Canaan who received from Yeshua lived a long time, and Eli who received from them lived a long time. Because we'll see the whole entire era. Well, there's only 3 generations from Moshe to Yeshua to Shmuel, as we'll see in a second. Yeah. So the point is that they received from Yeshua and from the Zakanim and from Pinchas. Right. So again, after Yeshua passed away, who was the main leader? It was Pinchas. Yeah, because also passed away, I believe, at the time. Shmuel Kibel Me'eli Beis Dinai, and Shmuel received. Well, actually, it was Elazar after Yeshua passed away. Then it was Pinchas. Okay, because Pinchas is Elazar's son. Shmuel received from Me'eli in his Beis Din. Good. So we have Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, the Zakanim, meaning which is Pinchas, Elazar, and the other Zakanim. Then we have Eli and his Beis Din. They all were students of Pinchas, and then Shmuel is a student of Eli and his Beis Din. David killed Mishmuel Beis Din. David received from Shmuel his Beis Din. David HaMelech was interesting in that regard. He was the Melech. He was also the primary source of Torah SheBal in his generation. He was the head of Sanhedrin. Funny enough, he was both. Which you don't. The rest of the history of.
Will he be a Nazi or
So the rest of the Melech, we don't see the other kings also head of Sanhedrin. It was David. Could be he was the head of Sanhedrin before he was a Melech. I'm not sure. But Achia of Shiloi. Why was he considered from Shiloh? Because that's where he lived, I guess. Because in Mitzrayim, he was one of those who left Mitzrayim.
What would you call him?
I guess he lived in Shiloh later on, yeah. But Levi, he was a Levi. Why is that important? Because he was not those who.
One of these 3.
But he was a point. He's a Levi because he was not part of the Gezerah of those who would pass away in the Midbar, right? Like the other Yidden, and therefore he was able to live a long time. Yeah. Right, but the point was that he Bechlal wasn't part of that yet. And he learned from Moshe Rabbeinu, but he's not considered someone who received directly from Moshe. We don't count the Mesorah as Moshe to Eli because he was Moshe. He was Achia Shilei from Moshe Rabbeinu. He was a minor. He was a minor, and he was also minor in stature. Moshe Rabbeinu's generation. He received from David in his bed. He's considered the next generation after David HaMelech. In terms of Mesorah, why don't you count? Yeah, he did. He ate vegetables. Why don't you count him after Moshe Rabbeinu? If he received from Moshe Rabbeinu, he left Mitzrayim because he was a cotton. Then he was not considered the stature of Talmud Chacham. Eliyahu Kibel Eliyahu Navi received from Achia Shleini in his Beis Din. Baal Shem Tov, we have a tradition also from Achia Shleini. I think the Baal Shem Tov in some ways is 3 generations from Moshe Rabbeinu. Elisha received from Eliyahu Navi in his Beis Din. You heard the Kohen Gadol. He received from Elisha and his Beis Din. Zechariah killed Zechariah received from Eliyahu and his Beis Din. Meshach killed Zechariah Beis Din. Hashaya received from Zechariah and his Beis Din. Amos killed Hashaya Beis Din. Amos received from Hashaya and his Beis Din. Yeshaya killed Amos Beis Din. Yeshayahu received from Amos and his Beis Din. Micha killed Mishaya and his Beis Din, and Micha received from Mishaya and his Beis Din. The Yellow killed Micha and his Beis Din, and Yellow received from Micha and his Beis Din. But Nachum killed Yellow Beis Din, and Nachum received from Yellow. The Chabakuk killed Nachum Beis Din. Chabakuk was a Navi also, and he's all Naviim. He received from Nachum and his Beis Din. But Tzefania killed Chabakuk Beis Din. Tzefania, a Navi, received from Chabakuk. The Yirmiyahu killed Tzefania Beis Din. Yom received from Tzefania's Beis Din. Baruch ben Yirmiyahu killed Miyam Beis Din. And Baruch ben Uriah was a Talmud of Yirmiyahu. He received from his Beis Din. The Ezra Beis Din, Ezra and his Beis Din, Baruch ben Uriah Beis Din. He received from Baruch ben Uriah's Beis Din. Here the Rambam pauses and he expounds about Ezra and his Beis Din. They had a very major influence on Torah SheBal. Beis Din shel Ezra came according to Anshe Sadela. Beis Din of Ezra is called the men of great assembly. The Haim, Chage, Zechariah, Malachi, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Very familiar names from Tanakh, right?
Yeah.
Nehemiah ben Chachloi, Nehemiah ben Chachloi. This is interesting because the Rambam in Perek Yud Gimel of basically the point is that the Rambam holds that Ezra and Nehemiah are not the same person. Some people hold that Ezra and Nehemiah are the same person.
Right.
Rambam clearly not. Fine. Mordechai Bilshan, former famous Mordechai from the Purim story called Bilshan because it has to do with the idea of the person who knows a lot of languages. The whole Ma'aseh there with Big Son and Sheresh, right? He knew 70 languages. That's what's called Mordechai Bilshan. There's Bavel, the Harbe Chammim, many other sages with them. Tash became 120 total. But we don't know all their names apparently, at least not over here, but the famous ones. The last one of them to survive, the last living member was Shimon the Tzaddik. He was one 120. He received Teshuvah from all. He was also King Gadol after Ezra. Good. So that is that famous Beis Din that had a major impact on establishing the. I believe so. Yes, and they had a major impact on solidifying the halachas and all the different opinions of, and being a coalition of SheBal. And Tignish Iseicha Beis Din. And Tignish, the man of Seich in his Beis Din, Kibbush Tzaddik Beis Din, he received Vishim Attack in his Beis Din. The Yeshiv ben Ye'ezah is say Yeshiv ben Ye'ezah, the man of Seich ben Yechon of Vishlayim. Here we have the first time. Every generation so far it's been one person basically, except for we had Yeshua, Pinchas, and Elazar, but really it was mainly Yeshua. Here you have now where there are always different opinions in Torah. At this point, you have now where it kind of like was clearly there were two schools of thought, where all the different schools of thought among Yidden kind of be grouped into different groups. You have what's called the Zugais, right? You have this in Pirkei Avos, right? So you have Yosef ben Ye'ezer and Yosef ben Yechon, each sort of wearing the crown of the Baal Mesorah of that generation. And their Beis Din, they receive from Antignas and his Beis Din. The Yeshua and Pachah and Yeshua and Pachah Beis Dinam and their Beis Din, Kibbutz Yosef ben Ye'ezer, Yosef ben Yechon and Beis Dinam, they receive from Yosef and these two Yosefs. Yehuda ben Tabib, Shim Meshatach, Yehuda ben Tabib, Shim Meshatach, Beis Dinam, and they're all come with them. Kibbutz Yeshua ben Pachah and they receive from Yeshua and Pachah and their Beis Din. Shmaya Vaftali and Geret Tzedek, Shmaya Vaftali were converts. Beis Din Kibbutz Yehuda v'Shimon, Beis Dinam, they received from Yehuda ben Tabai and Shim Meshatach and their Beis Din. Now the Rambam told us in the Sanhedrin that a Ger Tzedek cannot be on the Sanhedrin. So it's interesting how the Rambam over here lists them as the Baal Mesorah of the Sanhedrin, but over the passage they cannot be part of the Sanhedrin. And we talked about that in the Sanhedrin. We talked about different opinions why that could be, and we explained the various aspects of that. Okay, so Shmaya of Talion, they were the primary Chacham of that generation. Hil v'Shamai Beis Din Kibbutz Mishim Ma'av Talion Beis Din Hil and Shamai and their Beis Din, they received from Shmaya of Talion and their Beis Din. The Beichem Mezak. Now here the Rambam is going to after Hillel, and we have this in Pirkei Avos obviously. If you pay attention to how the Mishnah goes from Hillel and down to Beichem Mezak, and it goes back to Hillel's son. There's really two different lines of Mesorah from Hillel. You have Hillel's Talmud Yehuda and Zakkai, and you have Hillel's son Rabbi Shimon. And one of the reasons for that is because when the Romans came at that point and conquered Israel, in their opinion, the leader of the Jewish people was the rebel who has to be executed. So the Nasi, with Hillel's son, went into hiding. Because he went into hiding, he didn't have much to do with Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, who was not recognized as a leader, and if it was not as dangerous to be in public. So him and his Talmidim were sort of separated from Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, and now you have two lines of Mesorah from Hillel. You have Hillel and his son Shimon, and their descendants, and their Talmidim, and Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai and his Talmidim, his descendants. What? Oh, also good. They both receive from both of them, right? Something from Hillel and Shammai. Yeah, thank you. Right. That's why Pirkei Avos over here, right? If you notice, after it talks about where are we over here? Right, Yud Mishnah Days, which says Hillel v'Shammai. Then it says Hillel Yoyim. After that, you have him Gamliel and Shimon. Then it goes down Perek Beis with Nasi, and Gamliel the son of the Nasi, and then in Mishnah Gimel, it talks about Gamliel the son of the Nasi. It says a few missions of his what he would say, and then in the middle of Mishnah Dal it goes back to Hillel and Matav Shmat Zibur, and it goes from there back down to Beichem and Zakkai. Right, Mishnah Chet, Beichem Zakkai. But the same idea the Mishnah is giving us the Mesorah. So Beichem and Zakkai, Rabbi Shimon ben Hillel, Hillel Zakkai, Hillel Zakkai, and Beis Din. Beichem and Zakkai, and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Hillel, received from Hillel and Shammai. Hillel Zakkai and his Beis Din, which is Hillel and Shammai. Chamish, now the Rambam is going to go down to Beichem and Zakkai and his Talmidim, and later go back to the son of Hillel, Rabbi Shimon ben Hillel. Chamish Talmidim Hailech Ben Zakkai. Ben Zakkai had 5 famous students. The great sages who received from him the tradition. These are them: Rabbi Lazar Hagadol, Rabbi Lazar the Great, also known as Rabbi Lazar ben Arach, I believe. Rabbi Yeshua.
Hello. No. I'm not going tomorrow. No. I don't want to drive there. I can't park. I'm not going to go someplace and get stuck at 10 o'clock now. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. Right. Where's there a place where there is parking? No. First, you can't park in the driveway. Everyone else is going to be parked in the driveway. No, they're not. No. Melt a little bit. You know I go. I don't mind anything, but I'm not going to get stuck. I'm sorry. No. Goodbye. I'm not going to go drive someplace.
Yeah.
I don't mind driving in the street. I went to oil yesterday. I took the car.
Sure.
And I'm not going someplace in the middle of Queens and get stuck.
Yeah.
And not be able to get out. Or Queens or Brooklyn, wherever it is.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. Tom send you a taxi if it's so important. Okay. Tom send you by taxi if it's so important.
Yeah. I go all the time because they just okay, but I'm just not.
Sure.
10 o'clock at night, I'm not going to get stuck.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So over here. Rabbi Lazar Gadol. So who the 5 Talmidei Rechim Zakai? Rabbi Lazar Gadol, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yosi Hakayin, Rabbi Shimon ben Esano, Rabbi Lazar ben Arach. Oh, that's Rabbi Lazar ben Arach. Sorry.
Yeah.
Rabbi Lazar Gadol is Rabbi Lazar ben Hokeres. Excuse me. Yeah. Rabbi Kiv. Sorry. So we have Rabbi Lazar ben Hokeres, Rabbi Lazar Gadol, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yosi Hakayin, Rabbi Shimon ben Esano, Rabbi Lazar ben Arach. Good. They are the 5 Talmidei Rechim Zakai. Next generation. Rabbi Kiva ben Yosef killed Rabbi Lazar Hagadol. Rabbi Kiva ben Yosef, he received from Rabbi Lazar Hagadol, Rabbi Lazar ben Hercules. Yosef of Ger Tzedek, Yosef, his father was a Ger Tzedek. Why is Rambam feeling to tell us that? Because I forgot there's a reason. Okay. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Meir, Ger Tzedek, Ben Ger Tzedek, also Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was a Ger Tzedek. Rabbi Meir was a descendant of. Rabbi Meir himself claimed to be a descendant of Nero. The Roman Emperor Nero, who disappeared, everyone says he went Meshuggah, whatever. But the mayor said he was my descendant because the grain don't admit he became a Ger Tzedek, right? We have a Kabbalah Nero Mitzvah Gayer. So the mayor said he's his descendant, as it says in Mesachas Gittin. Okay. So Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Meir Ben Ger Tzedek, they give a seat from Rabbi Kiva, even though. We see Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva were colleagues. Rabbi Shmuel was somewhat of a student of Rabbi Kiva, apparently, at least initially, according to the Rambam. The Gam Kiva, Rabbi Meir, the Chaver, and Rabbi Shmuel, and so Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shmuel received from Rabbi Kiva. But the Rabbi Shmuel was also almost equal to Rabbi Kiva, and therefore Rabbi Meir was also, not just besides being a colleague of Rabbi Shmuel, as a student of Rabbi Kiva, he was also the student of Rabbi Shmuel himself. So he was like, in a way, one step removed from Rabbi Kiva. Okay. Meir's colleagues are, who again along with him received from Rabbi Shmuel and perhaps even from Rabbi Kiva as well. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon, this is the famous Shimon, Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Chaim ben Tadim. The Chen Kibbutz Chaver Shel Rabbi Kiva Meir Lazar Gadol. Rabbi Kiva and his friends also, not just Rabbi Kiva, we said was a Talmud of Rabbi Lazar Gadol, but he also had colleagues who received from Rabbi Lazar Gadol. In other words, apparently Rabbi Shmuel, or who received from Rabbi Kiva, was also a Talmud of Rabbi Lazar himself. Okay. So who are the Chamer of Rabbi Kiva who received from Rabbi Lazar Gadol as well? Rabbi Tarfon. They are the Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Shebei, who's this famous teacher of Yitzchak. Rabbi Shimon Lazar, Rabbi Yechim ben Nuri, and Rabbi Yechim ben Nuri. Yeah, so Rabbi Shimon Yochai's son, basically. Rabbi Shimon Yochai himself was a Talmud of Rabbi Kiva. Oh, sorry, no, never mind. I made a mistake. Fine, good. Now, so that's the Mesorah from Hillel on that side. You have Hillel Zaken, Hillel and Shammai, Yechim and Zakai, his famous 5 Talmidim, Rabbi Akiva, together with Rabbi Shmuel and Meir, their Talmidim, as we just listed, etc. Now, going back to Hillel and Shammai. Rabbi Shimon Gamaliel Zaken, Rabbi Gamaliel Zaken, excuse me, Kibel and Shimon Alvishal Hillel Zaken. again, Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, keep him Rabbi Shimon Aviv ben Aviv. Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, Rabbi Gamliel the elder, he received from Rabbi Shimon his father, who was Bnei Shel Hillel Hazaken. Okay, so we have Hillel, Shammai, Bichem, Zaken, etc.
It is very direct. Some.
Yeah. Here we have Hillel, as in Hillel and Shammai, to Rabbi Shimon, to Rabbi Gamliel. Basically, he goes Hillel Hazaken, goes Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon. He was a Nasi, and then Rabbi Shimon, and basically all the generations, there were 5 Rabbi Gamliels total between Tanim and Amoraim. That's why it's confusing sometimes who says what. Okay. Then Rabbi Shimon, his son received from him. Right. This is so Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken is the grandson of Hillel Hazaken. Rabbi Shimon is the great grandson of him. Rabbi Gamliel ben Kilmen, Rabbi Gamliel his son received him. Rabbi Shimon ben Kilmen, Rabbi Shimon his son received him. Rabbi Yehuda ben Neisha, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, the second Rabbi Shimon. This is. Yeah, this is the son of the third Rabbi Shimon. Zeronik Rabbi Kadesh. The Yehuda Nasi, the Yehuda, the son of the third Rabbi Shimon, is called our holy teacher. Who killed me up? He received from his father, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shemua, and also Rabbi Shemua, Rabbi Shimon Chaveder, and Rabbi Shimon his fellow. So Rabbi Elazar and Shemua. Did we mention him elsewhere so far? No, we didn't mention him. Okay, fine. Different opinions over here with the whole Mesorah over here, but this is Adam's opinion. Good. So this is he received from his father, Rabbi Kadesh. Sorry, from Rabbi Kadesh, from his father, Rabbi Shimon, and from also Rabbi Elazar ben Shuma, and from Rabbi Shimon, who was the colleague of. Here he teaches Rabbi Shimon Chaver is about Shimon ben Yochai, which is interesting. So that means that Rabbi Kadesh received from Shimon ben Yochai, who received directly from. He lived a long time, so he received directly from Rabbi Kiva. Yeah, okay. So he also, so in other words, that means that Yehuda Nasi brought both houses together. He received from the line of his father's family and from Yehuda Zakai, apparently. That's unique. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, he compiled the Mishnah. And the Rambam is going to do something similar with all being all SheBal in one place. That's why he brings up this issue. Now, Rambam told us earlier that the SheBal was not written down. Says the Rambam, there was no formal text that was used as a public, standard template for teaching Torah. In every single generation, the head of the Navi, who was the leader of that generation, he wrote himself personal notes to remember the Torah that he heard from his teachers. He would teach it publicly to other people. And I think also everyone is also allowed to write their own personal notes. It wasn't forbidden to write things necessarily, but it wasn't authoritative, right? When Hillel and Shammai gave those writings their personal notes to the next generation, right? Every generation did that. But that was the primary, marker of SheBal. It was the oral teaching, and there was the written.
You can imagine each person wrote down what they heard, and they heard something different.
Right, that's true. It's part of the complication. Yeah. Every single person wrote from his own, on his own, notes to remember the Torah and its explanations and halachas as he received and as he taught and learned. And besides the halachas that were by transmission, new novelties that were developed so to be every generation, by things that were not learned by tradition, and they were derived through the 13 ways of deriving the Torah that the Beis Haggadol agreed upon. In other words, it could be that a person becomes a good svart, or if it's not agreed upon by the Sanhedrin, it's not halacha. Over here we have, when the Sanhedrin agrees this is a legitimate, limud, and it's the paskin, based on this kalochem halacha, the new question arises, a new scenario that was never discussed, and based on that they paskin how they paskin, or they overturn a previous generation's ruling, based on your Gimavidus, and as understand the majority understands him, that becomes the halacha that again it's written down as is necessary, but for the individual to remember. That's what the system. That was a seder. But who kibitz kol hashmuos? So he gathered all these teachings. V'chol adin, all the halachas, v'chol abirun, all the explanations, the Perushim and their explanations. Shisham from Moshe Rabbeinu, as was learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. And was taught in Bezin of any generation on entire Torah. Meaning these generations, all these Chachamim and the Gedolim who wrote these notes, passed them down and he collected them all. The Mishnah from them, he wrote the book called the Mishnah. He taught it in public to the Chachamim. No, so they well, obviously, but the point is, it was that Yeah, they wrote it down. That's not the main Nakud. The main Nakud is even if they didn't write it down, maybe they couldn't write it down because whatever the reason was, they did write it down if they wanted to. But the main Nakud was it was a standard text template that now was the curriculum to teach Torah SheBal Peh. That was the main Nakud. From there you go and you want to darshan, right? But you talk about Shabbos, now you use this version. This was the Nigel L'chol Yisrael B'Ksul Klum. It was read to all the Jewish people. They all wrote it down. Ribtzu B'Chol Makim. It was publicized everywhere. Kadesh Lo Yishkach Torah B'Shal Peh Yisrael. It's that Torah should not be forgotten among the Jewish people. What happened? People's memory started getting bad. It says the Rambam. Why did he do this? He didn't leave good enough alone. And the Rambam wasn't good enough, right? Because he saw that the students are becoming diminished, and many different tsaras and problems are being the world's coming new tsaras, new problems never happened before. The evil empire of Rome was expanding and conquering the whole Iberian Peninsula and Europe and everything, and then and the Jews who were being scattered all in various places. He made one work, one book. Chibur means like a work, if you will. To be in the hand of everyone, so that everyone should learn easily, not forget it. No, it's much easier to remember. You have a standard text, a standard template, a standard, in Mishnah, the way the Mishnah is written is primarily to make it easy to remember. That's why sometimes it's written in a way you might wonder why it's written that way, and the Gemara always answers because it's like it makes it easier to. Yashav Koyamav Hu Beistin and his Bezin, they taught Mishnah Rabbim, but that became the template in which they taught Torah SheBal Peh to everyone else, right? Okay. These are the members of the Bezdin of Yehuda Nasi and who received the tradition from him. Shimon, the Gamliel Banav, his son Shimon the Gamliel. Guess who they are named after? Obviously, his ancestors, right? His father and grandfather, and great grandfather. Rabbi Ephes, Rabbi Chanina ben Cham, Rabbi Chia, Rav, Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Kapara, Shmuel, Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Hishia. These are famous names, from the Gemara, right? These are the famous Chacham we received from him, and with them were many thousands of other Chachamim. These are the famous ones. That's what we find. Sometimes it says Rav Tanu Padlik. Rav sometimes is able to argue on Tana because he's a fish murderer, but he was the level of a member of the Bezdin of Yehuda Nasi. We also find sometimes B'chia is called Tanu Padlik. Not as common, but you have such a concept. Okay, good. Even though these 11 Talmidim received Mir Kodesh and they were part of his base medrash, they don't all have an equal standing. Rabbi Yechanan Katan Haya. Rabbi Yechanan was a child, or you could say he was a minor in the sense of his level of Torah. And also, when he got older, he became, besides being a colleague of Yana, he was a student of Rabbi Yana. Rav also received from Yanai. Shmuel was a Talmud of Chacham. It was after Rabbi Yana passed away. The old Talmidim became like Rabbi's younger Talmidim. Now this is interesting because according to Rabbi Yanai was more senior than Rav. We don't find that Yanai Talmud in public though. Interesting, but okay. Now, continuing the tradition of Torah SheBal Peh. Rav Chiba Sifra v'Sifri. Rav compiled a work called Sifra and Sifri. The Lavar Hadia Yikar Mishnah explained the Mishnah is based basically on the Sifra is based on Chumash Vayikra, and Sifri is based on a minimum Devarim to explain the halachas I mentioned in those Chumash, and to explain in the Mishnah primarily based on the Psukim, which Psukim teach you which halachas. I mean, the Mishnah doesn't always tell you exactly the Psukim. The Gemara does that, but Sifra and Sifri was the first work to do that. Yeah. Today, our primary limud Torah SheBal Peh, we learn in a Sefer, we learn Gemara, right? At that time, you learn Mishnah, you learn Sifra and Sifri. The Chiba had Tesefta Levayin and Mishnah. The Chiba compiled the Tesefta. The Tesefta is also like a elongated version of the Mishnah. Explains a lot of things. Again, in Yeshiva say they don't learn it, unfortunately, but it would add a lot of richness to the limud of Gemara if they would do it. The also the Chiyam Bar Kapara they compiled brises that explain the Mishnah. It was this more expanded version. Again, the Mishnah is very concise. The brises and Tosefta are more expanded, more extensive, longer version of the Mishnah. Yeah, okay. You could say in some ways that the Tosefta and the brises to the Mishnah as the Torah to the B'Sheis. I'm speaking out loud. Okay. Yechanan compiled the Talmud Yerushalmi. We call it Talmud Yerushalmi in Eretz Yisrael. 300 years approximately after the Churban. So the Farshim ask, Where did Rambam get that from?
Yeah.
But it could be to Mesorah. His father taught him. Okay, anyway, that's when he compiled the Teshuvah, the Talmud Yerushalmi. Now, among the great sages you receive from Rav and Shmuel, you see, basically, the Rambam doesn't continue the whole tradition of his Talmidim, because apparently when he compiled Teshuvah, the Talmud Yerushalmi, that's where his line of Talmidim stopped, apparently. Although I think the most of the Talmidim who received from Rav and Shmuel traveled here to Israel back and forth from Bavel, and they received from Yechon as well. But the great sages who were students of Rav and Shmuel, back to the two-person system of Rav and Shmuel, yeah? Rav Huna, Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Nachman, Kahana, who are the students of Rabbi Yechanan? Rabbi Chana, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Dimi, Rabbi Oven. These are the famous Talmud Yerushalmi. Okay. So I said was wrong then. And who the Chacham received from Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Rav Yosef. They received from Rav Huna and Rabbi Yehuda, who were the famous Talmidim of Rav and Shmuel. Who the Chacham who received from Rabbi Yosef among them, and the famous ones among many others. Abai and Rava, right? We know they were there. They also received from Rav Nachman, who was also Talmud Rav and Shmuel. So even though the main ones apparently are Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, also Rav Nachman. But Rav Kahana, I'm not sure. The Klal Chacham Shekim Ben Rava, and who the Chacham received from Rava? Ram doesn't mention Abaya, funny enough. Rav Ashi v'Ravina, Rav Ashi and Ravina. Mar Bar Avashi, Kiba Me'av Ravina. Mar Bar Avashi received from his father Rav Ashi and from Ravina. Nimtza. The Rambam stops there for a second. This is very significant because that's the generation of the ending of the Gemara. Nimtza Rav Ashi ad Moshe ben Abayim Ish. If you go back from Rav Ashi, teacher, student, depending on how you go up the line, you have 40 people. Be'elohim, these are them. Rav Ashi from Nova, Meiraba, but you would say the name again, or it just says does it say Rava Meiraba or just says Meiraba?
Rav Ashi Meiraba.
Yeah, Meiraba. Meirav Huna, Meirav Yechon, Meirav Shmuel, yeah. Rabbi Akash Nasi, Rabbi Shimon ben Aviv, his father, Rabbi Gamil Aviv, Shimon Gamil, his father, Rabbi Shimon Shimon, his father, Rabbi Gamil Aviv, Gamil, the elder, his father, who is the father of Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Aviv, Shimon, his father. Then comes Hillel Aviv, Hillel, who was his father, and Shammai, B'Shammai. Shemai of Avtalion, Yehuda v'Shimon, Yeshua v'Netani, Yosef, the Rambam says the names a bit shorter, right? Yosef ben Yechin Yisrael, Yosef Yechin Yishlayim. Now Antignos. Shimon HaTzadik, Me'ezra, Me'Baruch, Me'Yirmiyah, Me'Tzfanya, Me'Chabakuk, Me'Nachum, Me'Yoel, Me'Micha, Me'Yeshaya, Me'Amos, Me'Yeshaya, Me'Zechai, Me'Yehuda, Me'Elisha, Me'Eliyahu Hanavi, Me'Achia, Me'David, David HaMelech, Me'Shmuel, Me'Eli, the Kohen Gadol, Me'Pinchas, Me'Yeshua, Me'Yeshua Beinu, Ram Shkol Aviyim, Me'Yeshua Beinu, Rav Pisha Aviyim, Me'Mashem Kisal, him from Hashem Kisal. These are 40 generations from Rav Ashi going back to Me'Yeshua Beinu, and tomorrow the Rambam will tell us exactly the whole history of how Teshuvah got from there to the Rambam. That's where the Shir ends for today. Yeah, I believe so. It does not.